So basically the goal of the session is basically how the stabilization of LABI as a new network in Latin America can be put in context with existent initiatives in Latin America. So existing initiative about, microscopy societies, biology societies, national, regional, and internationals, and also how we can, elaborate in better cooperation and strengthening the interaction with other communities like Africa Bioimaging, North America Bioimaging, Euro Bioimaging, and all others. So I have a very short presentation just to tell or have a guidance for me of what we have done and what we are working in terms of the political organization of LABI. Because, well, for Latin America, this is not a new. Latin America is a complex continent with many asymmetries and differences from population, economic perspective, political decision, which always depend also in the volatility of the government we have around, and this sometimes can be helpful, sometimes can be difficult. So organizing a network and have a strong foundation where we can grow is really a challenge. So, but so far, I have to say that we have done some path, and Latin American Bioimaging is a new established network of imaging scientists, and as imaging scientists, a really broad definition. It doesn't need to be, a graduated professional or, any postgraduated or whatever. Any person who belong to the community of bioimaging is welcome. And this is something very important that we want to claim. And is in particular interested not in just the scientific behind the bioimaging. It's also interested in training, expand the training, and in helping in growing training in remote area, and also, try to leverage on the education and accessibility of knowledge and equipment. So this is a challenge, as we say, because we go from Mexico to basically Quiaca, is the Tierra de Fuego, exacto. Ushuaia. Quiaca is in the norte, exacto. So it's a long continent with really many different asymmetries, as I said before. But so far, well, the first meeting that we have was in April 2018. And we discussed that this was, part of a project that Andres Kamai, Chris Good, and myself have together. The name was URUMEX. And then we basically participate in GBI annual meeting in number 4, presenting this idea. And in October 2018, Andres crossed the river and went to Buenos Aires, invited by Francisco, to CIASEM, which is basically the Congress for Latin American Microscopy Societies. And it was really an important point for our idea, because at this point was just an idea. And thanks to all the people who were there, also Kildare, I think Marco too, they basically thought that this was a fantastic idea, and indeed they start to communicate with us and try to elaborate more formally ways of establishing the LABI. And in April, in July 2020, we have defining this temporary executive committee that I will point it in the next slide, and then we have the first meeting of LABI, which was virtual in April 2021, in where a representative for each of the countries was presenting the situation and the status of the bioimaging in each of the places. With this, we elaborate a basically a document with Andres and Chris that is published in Focal Plane, where you can get a lot of information, quantitative information about, the different partners in the Latin America bioimaging. By the way, I can name it. So we are Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Peru, Colombia, Mexico, and Uruguay. And meanwhile, we were publishing this Focal Plane. We also did the joint meeting between LABI and Eurobioimaging, and this was with intention of basically understand from Eurobioimaging how we can elaborate a more engaged and collaborative community in LABI bioimaging. In November 2021, we received basically the result from this special grant of CCI, and there were a lot of success in Latin America. Indeed, 13 projects were funded, and for our luck, LABI was funded as a network, and this is really important because it will give us, for now to the next 3 years, a lot of support to grow, and Andres is going to tell why more about this, so I will not cover on that. And we are here with the basically the step back before. In April this year, we have a virtual meeting again where we collected information about the different activities that each of the grantees of this CCI grant will develop in the next 3 years. And I will give a report of this tomorrow in the working group of training and education. So, and now we get here to September, and the challenge for now in the future are, well, what this subgroup of governance is aimed to do. So I mentioned before that basically these are all the countries participating in LABI. I encourage to all of you who think that are interested in participate that please sign up in the webpage. And every individual core facility or laboratory who wanted to join Latin American Bioimaging is welcome. So far, there are a lot of different, techniques or technologies that are in Latin America, and these are some of the most important societies and centers who are participating in LAB. Well, what we promote? Well, we promote to establish formally LABI, and the most important thing is basically to support an impactful network to reach out the asymmetries and challenges that we have in Latin America. And in particular, we wanted to create a platform through our webpage in order to expand and broader and reach as quick and as fast as possible all the community. So the aims of LABI are the community building and the capacity building, and we basically have elaborated already some virtual meeting, and in the next 3 years we will have an annual meeting in person and also some other activities in virtual. I don't want to spoil, but Andres is also going to talk about the many different opportunities for the bioimaging community LABI will offer. And as I mentioned before, well, training and career development are part of our main goal. So this is our executive committee, temporary executive committee. And in this work in progress, the next slide is specifically about governance. But we also have working group on training and education. I will speak tomorrow about this, integration and with regional and international organization, and some others. The main goal now of the working group in governance is to leverage this very complicated and intricate network, which we have many different situations. It can be that a person from an institution want to participate. It can be that a center in the region can participate. It can be that, you know, an university can participate. And we are trying to, you know, go through the experience in many different organizations. And this is part of the idea of having all of you here to learn more about how to put all these things together. So basically, we will in charge to the governance working group from here to next year in April, May, to elaborate this basically mechanism and this foundational document that can be, of course, approved by the executive committee, and then we will have time for a mechanism of election of the new authorities, call the new authorities, and then presentation of the new authority, I hope, early next year. So with this, I would like to basically finish this introduction saying that if you are not already signed to LABI, you can scan this barcode and you can go straight to the registration form in our webpage. And we encourage all of you so we can know where you are. And this is very important because otherwise it's, you know, one by one, and we are trying to reach as much as we can, but it's never possible to go to all the different leaded, you know, edges in Latin America. So thank you very much. And following the agenda, I have the pleasure to introduce our first speaker today, which is Kildare Miranda, and he's president of CIASEM. He's representing today CIASEM, but he's also investigator in University of Rio de Janeiro. So welcome, Kildare.
Okay. Thanks, Leonel. And I'd like to thank also Andres, Leah, and all the friends, Chris, all friends that I've been working with for the past months, maybe over a year. And it's really a pleasure to see some familiar faces. I was happy to have a chat in here. I didn't know that he was attending. So it's really a pleasure to be here and to meet our friends. So I will just talk a little bit about CIASEM and how we think that LABI can contribute to CIASEM, and mostly how CIASEM can contribute to LABI. And so I will start just to give you a brief introduction on, it seems that it's not working. Okay. I have to go, yeah, 2 more. Okay, so just a brief introduction on how what is CIASEM and how it operates. So CIASEM is a regional umbrella for different organizations related mostly with electron microscopy because of this historical background. But now we see in the CIASEM more and more other microscopy techniques being presented and introduced. So it's a very it's a changing environment from electron microscopy to all the fields from microscopy. So we have the responsibility to hold the Inter-American Congress every 2 years, to sponsor and organize regional meetings and conferences with different players. We have a journal called Acta Microscopia, where we publish different papers from different areas, set up committees and other bodies, and initiate, promote, and coordinate exchange programs between different members of the organization and societies, and participate in joint committees with different societies. For instance, the IPSEN, which is the International Federation of Societies for Microscopy, so CIASEM is also a member of the IPSEN. So we have a number of societies from Canada to South America, which participate in every event that we have, as I mentioned, every 2 years. And with more or less participation from material science or life science. And this is something that it's very challenging now because as is a microscopy society which is dedicated to both material sciences and life sciences, we have this responsibility to bring people together. And with that, we have a number of challenges that I wanted to put here, our current and old, actually very old challenges that it's very hard to change. It's in line with what Vlad just said about technology and bringing people together and having people working together to bring to move things forward. So we have to connect people at national and continental level. So I have to connect people everywhere throughout the Americas. And for instance, I just put it a slide here, a figure from one paper that we published a few years back. If you look at the map of the distribution of microscopes in Brazil, we see that there is a concentration, a very, very high concentration in the South and Southeast region. So we have to connect people inside the continent, inside countries, and also in the continents. And we have to connect people across different disciplines. For instance, this is also from the same work in Brazil. It's easier for me to talk about Brazil because I'm more familiar with the situation there. We have different fields of expertise, if you may. And it's the map, the heat maps of the activity of microscopy across the country is divided in material science and structure and biology and bioimaging. And we see that this region in the middle here is very, very rare. We don't have many people working there. And this is something that it's very, very challenging. It's very hard to convince someone from the life science to work in a project that is more dedicated to technological development, and also to have someone from the technology field to come to help us in biology. This is really not a culture that we have mostly in Latin American countries. And we have, this is really, really challenging. I'm sure that a lot of our colleagues here already heard someone coming to the lab and saying, I just need a picture, just need an image. And then they even sometimes they don't know how hard it is to reach to their results, and we lack a lot of expertise in communication with the guys that develop different techniques. Also across scale, so more and more, this is everywhere. We have to image things across different scales, and this is also challenging because it demands a lot of funding. It demands a lot of expertise, and this is something that we're trying to build between this connection between different countries. And also we have some challenges with the diversity or asymmetries in funding. So it's completely different if you talk about Canada, or if you talk about the US, or if you talk about Peru or Brazil or Argentina. And as Leonel mentioned, we are very, very sensitive to different policies of the government. So recognition by the governments and by the society. So we discussed a little bit about this at the CCI meeting. So different countries see differently how we work with how the scientific activity should be valued, should be recognized. We have completely different installed base of instruments. As I just mentioned, that in Brazil we have more than 700 electron microscopes, and sometimes in neighbor countries, it's very, very hard to find a good funding and support for equipment. And connections between academia, research, and industry in some countries, or maybe in some institutions in Brazil or other countries, it's almost a sin to have a connection with industry or to work in a project that has a direct interest from the private sector or from the industry. And this is something that we have to change. And it's nice to learn from the examples of other countries and other institutions. And this is something that we try to do working as a network. And also these connections between the government and the private sector to support the activity, the scientific activity. This is, at least in Brazil, is very, very rare. So, and as Vlad also mentioned, we have to do it across scales. We have to do it in biology. We have this challenge to study from the atom, from the molecule to the whole animals. We have to establish the facilities and communicate between these different scales, and this brings a lot of data, a lot of new tools that also for some countries in Latin America, it's very underdeveloped. And this is something that is in our radar, and we want to integrate these countries, these centers through the CIASEM with learn from the centers that have it. And I loved when I saw this picture. I think that it says a lot. So we have people holding the community in Latin America, and I think that this is the message that LABI wants to send, and that we want to be part. I'm part myself and my group of LABI, but as a society, as that is operating between different countries, we hope that we can add some value and bring resources and connect people to LABI and LABI with CIASEM. So this is something that we are really happy to be part of, and I'm sure that our colleagues at CIASEM, Francisco Capani is a former president of CIASEM. I'm sure that he agrees with me that we're open and we can. We're really happy to discuss future directions to improve our Latin American bioimaging community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kildare, for the presentation. Well, now following the agenda, we have Francisco. We will set up. Francisco is president of the Argentina Microscopy Society, and he will tell more about that.
Bueno, si no le molesta hablar en español, por una cuestión de comodidad. Bueno, yo actualmente soy el presidente de la Sociedad Argentina de Microscopía. Como dijo Kildare, también participé activamente en la Sociedad Interamericana, fui presidente, vicepresidente. Ahora todavía participo siendo tesorero. La Sociedad Argentina de Microscopía es muy joven como sociedad en sí mismo, y no tiene, digamos, la actividad que tiene, por ejemplo, lo que contaba Kildare recién, ¿no? La Brasileira. Bueno, de hecho, voy a contar una pequeña anécdota. La Sociedad Argentina, la que tenemos ahora, se formó por una sugerencia de Vanderlei de Sousa, que es bueno, era tu jefe, ¿no? O es tu jefe, el jefe de Kildare, que fue uno de los que fundó el CIASEM. Yo hice uno de mis postdoc en la UCSD, en la Universidad de California, San Diego, y después me fui a Suecia, al Karolinska, en el interim. Me invitó, bueno, en Estados Unidos la conocí a Marcia, que es una de las que forma parte del comité de LABI, y me dijo que se organizaba un congreso, una reunión regional, si no quería ir a charlar ahí, fui, y me acuerdo que nos lleva a una oficina Vanderlei y nos dice, tienen que armar la Sociedad Argentina de Microscopía, no puede ser que no exista. Y bueno, y yo después me fui a Suecia, y cuando volví en el 2006, ahí se comenzó a armar. Y bueno, estamos en los últimos pasos burocráticos de terminar el armado de esta sociedad. Como contaba de algunas experiencias, tal vez sirva para los más jóvenes. Yo me inicié en esto, yo soy médico de formación. Yo me inicié trabajando en el Instituto de Robertis, En su momento Argentina era un centro muy importante de microscopía. De hecho, de Robertis es el padre de la biología celular moderna. Y ayer el sábado, cuando estaba armando esto, un detalle, ¿no? Pero hace un año falleció mi papá, que tenía 90 años. Era un italiano, como tantos que llegaron a la Argentina, con mi mamá, que tiene 86, está viva. Y encontré el microscopio que me había regalado cuando tenía 7 años, uno chiquitito de plástico. No sé si tiene relación, uno siempre estas cosas las lleva con la parte del sentimiento, ¿no? Pero bueno, yo empecé siendo ayudante de segunda en la Facultad de Medicina de la UBA y de ahí hice toda mi carrera. Volviendo un poco al tema, esto para mover, era así, ¿no? Pum, pum. No, ahí lo saqué. Me parece que toqué el botón incorrecto. Ahí va, sí, ahora todo. Bueno, esto lo hablaron en otra charla. Una iniciativa muy buena en Buenos Aires fue el armado de estos sistemas nacionales. Ya dieron detalles de cómo están armados, de cuál es digamos, las ventajas de este sistema. Ahí abajo tienen la página, y uno de ellos es el Sistema Nacional de Microscopía, que en cierta manera me permitió un poco, como yo no contaba con el aparato, poder desarrollar esto en Buenos Aires. La Sociedad de Microscopía Argentina se basa mucho en difundir la microscopía, el uso a partir de este sistema. La Sociedad Argentina de Microscopía cuenta con 200 miembros más o menos. También, como toda sociedad, está distribuida en la parte biológica y en la parte de materiales. También, como contaba Kildare, es muy difícil la asociación entre el material science y la parte de biológica, y más aún es más difícil todavía si uno tiene que asociar la parte de desarrollo tecnológico para poder llevar adelante iniciativas. Así todo, en su momento no estaba esto. Brasil contaba con un programa que era el ProSul, de los cuales muchos de los argentinos pudimos ir a visitar ese navío, que era una especie de network, en cierta manera, financiado por el Mercosur, que funcionó muy bien, ¿no? Permitía el acceso a ciertos aparatos que están, como bien decía Kildare, muy concentrados en Brasil. Porque en la Argentina, cuando yo volví en el 2006, los aparatos eran muy obsoletos y en Argentina uno de los problemas es que cierto nivel de desarrollo de lo que uno podría llamar la escuela de microscopía se fue perdiendo, porque muchos investigadores se movieron más a la biología molecular y a la fisiología, ¿no? Más que continuar con cierta escuela de microscopía. Yo un poco con esta imagen, lo que le quería mencionar, yo soy usuario, aparte de ser el presidente de imágenes de programas, de software, de microscopía electrónica. Esto es un poco un recorrido de lo que hice cuando estuve en Estados Unidos que estuve con Mark Ellisman trabajando, y después estuve con Lennart Brodin en Suecia, fueron casi 8 años. Bueno, cuando hablaban recién la doctora Brown, yo trabajé en Klatrina, en Suecia, es esa reconstrucción que tienen ahí. Bueno, en esa época, un poco, esto lo muestro para mostrar todo el desarrollo que hubo. Yo en el laboratorio había una persona que desarrollaba software. Entonces la primera imagen que tienen acá es el software desarrollado en el laboratorio de Mark. Entonces uno agarraba, se sentaba con la persona que hacía el software y le decía, necesito una vesícula redondita. Entonces me acuerdo que Steve Lamont siempre estaba enojado. Tenía una imagen en la puerta de su despacho que era un pulpo que decía Microsoft. Porque el problema de esos programas que se usaban solo en Linux. Y lo mismo fue cuando fui a Suecia. Yo cuando volví en la Argentina, tuve algunas iniciativas, obviamente era 2000, lo que ven ahí fue, Mark Ellisman desarrolló mucho lo que se llama telemicroscopía, que también es una manera de generar network, es decir, usar un microscopio a distancia, fundamentalmente cuando el microscopio es único. Mark ahora compró uno nuevo, el que yo usaba se dio de baja, tenía un microscopio que era un 4000 KB que estaba para hacer neurobiología. Y él hacía telemicroscopía y accedí, creo que fue la primera vez en Latinoamérica que se accedió a un microscopio, lo pude mover, sacar una foto. Después eso quedó medio en la nada, como muchas cosas, hasta se hizo un prototipo de software para hacer un programa de telemicroscopía desde acá, desde Argentina. Después yo me fui a Suecia, bueno, y cuando volví, las cuestiones económicas y las cuestiones políticas cambiaron, que a veces son uno de los problemas que hablábamos recién de financiamiento con algunos de los colegas, que muchas veces varía según con qué ojo se mire al científico, si con el derecho o con el izquierdo. Entonces se generan ciertos problemas. Y lo que tienen abajo, en el 2019, justito antes de la cuarentena, bueno, yo era director de un instituto UBA CONICET, y bueno, por distintos motivos empecé a buscar un lugar que me dé mayor posibilidad para armar la parte de microscopía, porque si bien la Facultad de Medicina fue un faro que iluminó un poco la ciencia en la Argentina, está un poquito alicaída, bueno, y la Universidad Abierta Interamericana me ofreció armar un espacio para el microscopio electrónico, que es lo que tienen ahí abajo, que ese microscopio electrónico lo conseguí por una donación de Suiza, del Instituto Caltech de Zurich. Y fue cuando fui al Senavió en Brasil, es una anécdota mía graciosa. Había venido ULAEBI al SAMIC que se hizo en Mendoza y le dije, ¿no tiene un microscopio para regalarme? Yo se lo dije en chiste, con el típico sarcasmo porteño. Y él no entendió el chiste, entonces me dijo, a los dos días me dijo, sí, encontré uno, ¿cómo hacemos para llevarlo a Buenos Aires? Y bueno, y ahí empezó una historia que tiene sus ribetes porque tuvo 7 años parado por problemas políticos y creo que este viernes se va a instalar. Bueno, cuento estas cosas porque en cierta manera, y si entienden los que financian, a ver, trabajar en Latinoamérica es muy duro y no es solamente duro por falta de dinero, sino a veces por problemas políticos. Entonces, cada cosita que uno consigue en Latinoamérica tiene un valor muy importante, porque no es fácil trabajar acá. No solamente por tema que salarios bajos, sino aparte porque los recursos son pocos. Bueno, quería agradecer a los que me invitaron, que está ahí atrás Andrés. Andrés en su momento, que lo mencionó tu nombre, Leonel, yo organicé el CIASEM en Buenos Aires y me pidieron un espacio para esto y yo se los di con gusto y bueno, más que contento de ver todo esto, ¿no? que sirvió la iniciativa. Bueno, y como dicen todos, espero que siga creciendo, ¿no? Así que bueno, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Francisco. So the next speaker is Marcos Guimaräes, sorry, and Marcos is representing the Sociedad Brasileira de Microscopía y Microanálise.
Okay, so first I'd like to say thank you for the kind invitation. The Brazilian Society is very happy to stay here and of course to try to propose some kind of integration with LABI. So my intention here is show you more about the Brazilian Society, and then of course finally when you how you can integrate and propose some for LABI. So Brazilian Society was founded in 1971. We reached 50 years in last year. Initially focused on just electron microscope, and then now, of course, you migrated to include all fields of microscope and microanalysis. So probably Brazilian Society operate with similar with other societies. And when you have professional, student, and corporate members, and we finished in last year our first network of our facilities that included not only electron microscope, but other kind of techniques. So the Brazilian society always looking for capacitation. You have concern about gender equality, valorization, and scientific divulgation. Here, just to show some events that were organized last year. Point of microscopy, you have a good times here. Good press in microscopy, woman in science, and more recently, some calls to young talents and the image awards. So the SBMM believes that good ideas born from connections. And you have been working hard for that in the last 50 years. And where you reach around 200 events, including national congress, symposiums, workshop, and small school and trainings. And you have around 600 members today. So you have a small network, like you call SBMM Orbit, where companies, centers, members and non-members that just frequent our events are connected with our society. So this network is very smart and integrate and communicate and propose all the time. And now you're looking for more integration with international communities that we stay here to discuss how you can implement this. And of course, as I mentioned before, our always concern about gender equality. And more recently, you open calls for advanced techniques like computational microscopy that probably you started our first school in next year, January. So LABI, I know the LABI orbit, but you have you try to understand. You put SBMM in contest with LABI in the same orbit, you know, and then when you collide and shock, well, of course, I don't know what's the next. But as I told you, SBMM is a strong belief that good ideas and initiatives born when you put people together. And this network, of course, like a system bottom up, maybe some initiatives and good ideas born when you put in contest these connections. So, of course, you need some support to establish these connections. When national and international grants are very important. And of course, to getting people working together and stimulate some public policies is very important too. And of course, you never forgot that young scientists and students are very important in this context. So more pragmatically, what can SBMM do with LABI? What's our proposal? So you discuss a plan ahead, like give more previsibility to some actions and share initiatives and combine effort, acting together for communications, and of course share support on calls. So, and finally, now I like to invite you to join us. In this year, you have a symposium focus on life science that occur in November this year in Fortaleza. and our national congress that will occur in October of next year in this beautiful place called Porto de Galinhas. And you have really happy for this event because you have a possibility to work together with CIASEM. And of course, you officially invite the LABI to join us and think about an expansion session in this event. So I thank you again. This is the ISBM board. I'm Marco, current president, and Rodrigo Portugal and Prioli, vice president for life science and material science. Paula Mendes, our secretary, and Eduardo Torres, our treasurer. So thank you again.
Of course. And now is the turn of Caron Jacobs, who is representing Africa Bioimaging Consortium. Caron, please.
While I wait for my slides to come up, I'd just like to say thank you very much for having me at this meeting. I'm an odd one out in that I'm all the way from Cape Town, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here at this Latin Bioimaging meeting. And my strongest congratulations to Leonel, Andres, and the rest of the Latin Bio team for everything that you're doing here. So far, this is very impressive. So as mentioned, I'm here to represent the African Bioimaging Consortium. I always like to start with highlighting that Africa is obviously much like Latin America and South America, complex and diverse. It's over 54 countries, over 100 languages, which means, to state the obvious, I'm only a representative of the continent and of African Bioimaging Consortium, or ABIC. But it's also useful to start with understanding the complexity, because it also understands a lot of the challenges that we have, and I think that we share with Latin America, in that due to the complexities of our history, diverse politics, colonial histories, that sort of thing, there are a lot of challenges within Africa, and these trickle down to resource-intensive technologies such as microscopy. So the low-hanging fruit of the obvious ones is sort of that it's resource intensive, so obviously we don't have a lot in many of our settings. This limits access to equipment, limits access to training and to local expertise. But perhaps the less obvious ones, but I'm sure will sound familiar to you, is that due to the complexity of the continent, there's also very limited communication. A lot of research happens in silos. There are language barriers within the continent. Aside from the over 100 indigenous languages, we also have 4 main groupings of sort of European languages that are spoken across Africa, which means we have, similar to within Latin America, it's hard to get different portions of the continent to easily work together. And therefore, there's also just a lack of exposure of what's going on in Africa and what is available and what can be done. That's not to, oh, okay, there we go. So I like to talk about this feeding into a self-enforcing cycle where without this access, without this exposure, without this training, there's not a lot of uptake of opportunities when they are made available. So there are limited opportunities that get to be made available. There's not a lot of support from political sectors, from universities, sometimes for resource-intensive endeavors such as imaging, as well as from vendors, because they don't see a lot of demand for their services, and there's not a lot of infrastructure. So I'm sure this rings a bell, and what will also be familiar from what I'm hearing, what I've heard today so far, is that despite a lot of these challenges, in Latin America, you have started to build an infrastructure, and in Africa, we're starting to see the same. We have some infrastructure throughout the continent, but it's really not a lot. If you consider the size of the continent, we have, from what we've been able to identify, only 16 what would call themselves facilities open to users from the rest of the continent. Within South Africa, we have a little bit more, but also not a lot. So there's often a perception from people when we ask for support for imaging that say, well, we don't see it. We don't see a demand for it. And we got definitive proof that there is incredible demand for microscopy in Africa from a workshop that we ran in Cape Town in January 2020. And by lowering the barriers of access by covering the cost of attendance for the workshop, we saw, and this is a great paper that highlights a lot of what we learned from this workshop, but just to keep moving forward, we saw incredible interest in this workshop. For 24 spots within a workshop, we had over 700 applications from throughout Africa, which absolutely highlighted that there is an interest, there is a demand, there is a need for training in microscopy, for ways to implement microscopy in Africa. It's just that all of these barriers are in place to hinder access. One of the things that was learned, was absolutely driven home from our experiences with that workshop, is that it's not sufficient to just make training available to researchers. They came to this workshop and they spoke about how incredible it was to be able to learn and to get hands-on experience and learn about microscopy, but a lot of them were going home to nothing. We had people implementing theoretical training and curricula on microscopy because they had no access to microscopes where they were. With Imaging Africa and a number of other initiatives working to increase training and exposure, increase access to resources, it's not sufficient because they also don't see a lot of uptake unless we lower the barriers, such as Imaging Africa, for researchers to actually access these initiatives. The African Microscopy Initiative, you heard Vlad mention this morning, and I will touch on it briefly towards the end of it, but that's something quite new. But again, it's without addressing the need for a community and pulling researchers together, letting them know what's there, and minimizing duplication of effort between other initiatives, because they can see who's doing what and where the gaps are. All of these endeavors will actually not be sustainable, and they will have reduced reach of impact. So this is where African Bioimaging Consortium comes in, and this is what we are trying to do with starting up ABIC, to really sort of fill this niche and to get the research community within Africa speaking to each other and sharing information. So we're a bit younger than LABI. We started just online, the humble 18 researchers from 8 countries that we brought together in a meeting in March 2021. And from there, we've kind of just run with it. Our ambition has always been to be community driven and to have as low a barrier of access to be able to participate in ABIC as possible. And we are quite proud with what we've been able to do in the past 18 months. And that this number is a few months out of date, but we're now over 180 researchers involved from over 19 countries. We're getting increased participation in certain hotspots, which is absolutely great because it means the community is growing without just 1 or 2 people driving it. But what we're very proud of is to be able to see the diversity of career stages involved in ABIC, as well as the range of research areas interested in it, to prove that really it's not just a few of us, it's not just PIs who want the fancy microscopes, it's not just infectious disease researchers or plant biologists, it's really all of us across all sectors that see the value of microscopy and bioimaging and are looking for ways to implement it in Africa. So a little bit about what ABIC does briefly. I will keep this brief, but I always like to highlight our website first. It sounds obvious, but this is for the most part how people find us and how they first contact us. And this is always under development, but just to show, aside from sort of basic information about us, we're building a resource hub that researchers who are interested in protocols, SOPs, where they can find additional training, they can access it there. We have, much like LABI, a web page sort of highlighting opportunities, again, so that people know where they can go. They know when there's a workshop or a conference or whether it's online or in person, that's accessible to them. They know that they can see it there. And we have an upcoming community meeting. And the last thing I'll touch on is the community network. So this we cheekily called the map. It's a map of microscopy in Africa, or the Microscopy in Africa platform. And this is a way to increase the visibility of microscopy in Africa. There are clearly fantastic existing networks within Latin America, sort of that are connecting researchers. In Africa, there's not much at all, and there's been no visibility for researchers in Africa, to the point that when we started out, and even when we ran the first Imaging Africa workshop, it was kind of experimental because we didn't know what was out there, because a lot of these facilities don't have an online presence. So if you're not the lab next door or a collaborator, you literally have no idea that the microscope is there. So this is community sourced information to try and identify what is in Africa. This increases visibility of researchers to the network as well as the rest of the world. And this is great in a time where everyone is interested in increasing the diversity of their meetings, the diversity of their networks, to say, well, you're looking for African researchers, you're looking for Black scientists, you're looking for more diverse networks. This is where we are. We have 2 community-led working groups focusing on training and on developing a Africa targeted and context specific training curricula, and our second working group actually building on our map to do a more detailed survey of the African microscopy infrastructure across the continent. And very excitingly, and with the very generous support of CZI, we will be announcing next month, actually, some travel fellowships to build connections, research connections within the continent. A lot of researchers who do have access or interested in microscopy in Africa are having to travel to collaborators in Europe or the UK or America to access equipment. So through this travel fellowship, we're wanting to say, well, if you have either a pilot project and you're in a location where there is not a microscope, through, for example, the map, identify a potential collaborator and go visit their lab instead. If you have an existing collaboration, but you don't have the resources to travel to visit them, that's through a different category that we can support that trip as well, which we're very excited to be able to do. As with LABI, we are working to build the community through just getting the community together. In some cases, all in one physical room. We'll be doing that for the first time next month, which is very exciting. And then we have in the pipeline to be kicked off from that meeting a series of online events to increase and maintain uptake and build the network ongoing from that. I want to touch briefly on the African Microscopy Initiative. This slide does not do it justice, but I'm so excited to be able to talk to you about it. This is an initiative that is separate from ABIC, that is going to be working in very close partnership with and is very complementary to ABIC. So where ABIC's focus has really been on building the community and getting the community to talk to each other and aware of microscopy, through ABIC, we're trying to address some of the other challenges. So the biggest component of that is going to be an open access microscopy facility in Cape Town, sharing some space with my own core facility, actually, which is very exciting. And that's with the, again, very generous support of CZI as well as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And as well under the African Microscopy Initiative umbrella will be a series of different microscopy training platforms, which will increase the capacity of the ability to train trainers throughout Africa, which will be exciting. And then a program to look at how we can just distribute used equipment throughout the continent in a way that make sure that the equipment is actually used and it's not just a dumping ground for the world's secondhand broken systems, which is very exciting. So this is an incomplete slide of, in the very short time that we have been functioning as a community, we have had incredible support from networks both regionally and throughout the world. So you would have heard repeatedly through the mentions of global bioimaging community this morning that there is a South African bioimaging network that we have linked up with quite closely within the South Africa region. There is also a Microscopy Society of Southern Africa, which sounds very similar to the networks that were described a few minutes ago. They have the same challenge of sort of balancing material science and life science, EM and optical microscopy. So we're working out how we can work together with them as they look at expanding through Africa as well. There are existing West African using groups, which is great. Regional networks is fantastic. And now, of course, today, it's very exciting to see how we can partner with Latin America Bioimaging to see where we can work together. And I think there are a lot of opportunities for partnership. Obviously, the low-hanging fruit is pairing up for online events and sort of ways so that we can increase training and exposure. But I think I've used here the word unique, but I think that's actually the wrong word, because there are actually shared community needs that we can look at how we can address together. We are looking for novel ways to partner with industry, and it sounds like LABI is starting to do the same, and ways to partner and advocate with governments, which I think LABI is actually a few steps ahead of us in this, and we would love to learn from you and see how we can learn how to implement this together and see which strategies work in different parts of the world. Something that we're very conscious of is sustainability strategies going forward in terms of how we maintain funding so that we can serve the community. And that sounds like something sort of on your minds as well. I'm sure there are many more opportunities. Just acknowledgements, obviously, as I said, I'm a representative, even within ABIC. It's not a one-man show. We have a fantastic executive committee, a team. We have working group coordinators who have taken the reins with that, and we're very appreciative of them. An incredible scientific advisory board from around the world, very generous funding from CTI, thank you, Vlad, and then support from my home institute for allowing me to spend so much time doing this. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Caron, for the nice presentation about ABIC. It is a sister initiative, and I think we start together at some point. So now is we have time for discussion and questions. So please, Vlad, go ahead.
Those are fantastic presentations. Thanks to all. One thing that I want to ask, if you were to think about one topic around which all the networks can collaborate with, and thinking that this will be the most impactful way with the most impactful outcome, what this one thing would be?
I think that the first thing that I would invest is in communication. I mean, travels, visiting, short visits. I mean, try to connect people, sponsor these connections between the different networks in different places. I think that this is something that we miss a lot, at least from my perspective.
Improve the connections to avoid overlaps. Sometimes a center organize a meeting or a course, and the same course in other. And then you need to improve our communication and avoid overlaps. It's difficult to our transport is very, very expensive here. You have a lot of complexity to dislocate people for different regions of South America and Latin America. And then I think that if you improve our communication and avoid overlaps is the first begin.
One of the deficits that I see in Latin America is the training of young people. I remember that in 2006, I was in Brazil for the first Latin American School of Microscopy. And later I was in Venezuela in 2008 for the second Latin American School of Microscopy. I mean, I guess that we are getting old and we need young people. Then I guess that the good topic would be create a school for microscopy. Then, and the problem with this kind of school is the money, with the resources, basically because to pay tickets. In fact, now we have I will announce it, we have the Congress of CIASEM in Mexico, and it's at the end of October. And really, it's very difficult to reach the place. Even if it's not an expensive place, the salary of the students are really short. Then probably Latin American School of Microscopy could be a topic that could join everybody. Or at least could be Africa and Latin America. No? We can do one in Africa and one here. It's not a problem, but the thing is how to get the fundings, basically for the fellowships. No?
I feel like I'm in the trick spot now that I've heard everyone else's answers. I get to have the last vote or something.
No, now it's not.
It is working now. Okay. I think one of the problems is that there's not just one thing that can be done, but
No, it was good. Just we can hear.
okay, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. I think what we've learned through ABIC is that a lot of these funding workshops, that sort of thing, there are enough other willing initiatives and people. If you create opportunities and let them know that there will be uptake, there are people willing to do that. What we're learning through ABIC, and I suspect this might be the useful thing in this environment as well, is to make sure that people know about what's going on. So the communication, the creating awareness, letting people know where they can access things, what is going out there, so that there's not duplication of effort, that sort of thing. I think that's one of the biggest things that creates impact. And it sounds simple and it is so hard.
Sorry, somewhat.
It sounds
Yeah.
it sounds simple, but it's just incredibly hard, because that means that we need to know where it is,
Right.
and we need systems in place to find out, and that there's consistent informational input into ABIC. So for example, if people are organizing workshops, they need to let us know so that we can let the rest of the network know. I think it's almost the simplest thing to do, and I think it could have the biggest input, but it requires manpower. Money to travel would be nice. Knowing how expensive travel has got in the last few weeks, that would take a lot of money. I would challenge that as well, that I think I don't belittle at all the value of being in the same room as people. We've learned that over and over again as we've been able to, again in the last few months. But we needed another solution as well for sustainability. Yeah, we need, I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what it is, but we need another plan as well.
Thank you.
And one thing that Claire mentioned, that is very hard to get recognition, to have recognition, playing a role of someone that's not taking care of its own career, but taking care of centers or open facilities. And this is something that would really improve our field of, I mean, if we have recognition for this type of role, someone that is dedicating their time to integrate other people, donating their time to other people. This would be, I think that would change the whole landscape of our activity, because it's we had an event in the Brazilian Society for Microscopy and Microanálise, and one of the technicians said that his career was an accident. So there was no plan to reach this position where he was, and it's very hard. Very few people are willing to do that, and it's so if we're able to value that, I think that more people would join, and then we'll have a completely different scenario.
Thank you. Can I have a follow-up question?
Maybe just an idea in between, because obviously I come from data. How does data sound as a common task for the future? No, because our Chilean situation, I think it's not so different from other situations. Okay, if we get the nice microscope, no, it's a data monster. So what are we going to do with the data? And then data triggers a lot of questions in society. So digitalization, what I do with my information and all that. So maybe there could be a common denominator to have a common articulation. And we would also solve other questions that are associated to the data. We would save like our problem and additional problems. So that is sort of starting to work a little bit in my surrounding, but what do you think about that? Because everything I heard is like almost similar to any other discipline as well, no? Of course, we need new, more younger and talented scientists. No, of course, we need to gather again and build community and improve communication. But what about like that data twist, maybe? What do you think?
I think that you said it all. I mean, it's and I think that it's maybe it's an easier thing to do together, to do as a community, because as long as we are able to transfer large amount of the data, this is something that a person in one place can help a lot of other people. But I think you said it all. It's something that it's key, and Carol's also said that it's difficult to solve with one thing. You know, have a lot of it's have a lot of problems to solve at the same time. But for sure, data management and analysis is a big problem now.
Good idea, because I mean, the young people like the data, no? More than to watch on the microscope. Then probably it's a good idea to focus on data. Yeah, you know, they like I mean, I have three children, and I mean, they no microscopy, but they love the data. Then probably it's a good idea to focus on data, because it's one of the big problems, and I see most of the society is to train young people, because there is a gap, and in our region the gap is larger because many people go to US. Because when you finish the PhD here, you don't have sometimes many things to improve your career. Then you move to US or to Europe, and this is a real situation in the region. Besides the fundings, no.
Do we still have time?
We still have time, yes.
So I really appreciate your view on the previous question, and you identified the most important challenges. Now, if you think about the outcome, let's say you all collaborate like globally between the networks, we avoid the duplications. What is this one outcome that you think would be the most impactful in advancing bioimaging? And what is the product? I mean, is it creating one global workshop? Is it creating a resource database for everyone? Something like that, like materialistically, what do you think would be this one outcome would be the most impactful?
You challenge the audience.
See, that's the thing. I mean,
That's the thing.
we always talk about challenges.
Yeah.
We probably need to focus also what's the outcome. So I'm curious, what is your thought right now, off the top of your head? If I'll ask you this question, what will be your answer without much thinking about it?
I would say that it's to have people engaged and passionate again about this on this activity. You know, at least we see from our side in Brazil, we see a lot of students evading scientific activity. They don't have hope on the activity that we develop. And I think that engaging people, engaging young scientists would be an excellent outcome of these activities. I mean, if we are able to put together different groups, different networks, and they can see the beauty again of the career that we chose, I think that would be a wonderful outcome.
Okay. Well, yep.
When I started with the telemicroscopy project, that I used the microscope from Buenos Aires to US, the idea was to try to use some equipment that is not available in this region. Later, the question was who is in charge of this kind of project. And this is the point that also say Kildare, that we don't have people. Because, like what I told you before, the young people, at least in Argentina, they go away, finish the PhD and go to North America or Australia or Europe. And the challenge is to create a community, that a stable community means I mean, we can see the future. This is for me the main challenge in this moment.
I think community is it, but retention of scientific expertise, of good, passionate people who are actually can work in science and are able to in their home region or home continent. We have the exact same problem in Africa. We have amazing scientists who get trained up and there's no opportunity for them. So they go to Germany or the UK or France or the States or Australia. It's so hard to pinpoint one outcome because the way you retain them is by creating an environment that there's opportunity and that it's appealing, which means if we want imaging scientists, we need, at least in Africa, we need a shift where not only is there equipment, but they're in core facilities that need staff, that there's funding for staff, that can be retained, that they can maintain an interest in science. So they're not just general dogs bodies, but they can actually be involved in research as well and have an opportunity to advance their own careers. It's a mammoth task because we're having to look at how to shift how science is done. Because microscopy is not for the sake of microscopy, right? The images are beautiful, we all love them, but microscopy is a tool in science. We're all passionate about microscopy because of, and building capacity because it needs to be used well for the purposes of advancing knowledge, which means that it's the entire scientific ecosystem. Perhaps this is actually something that is worth looking at bilaterally, is how we can, in both environments, develop a culture and an ecosystem that there's actually just opportunity for people. I mean, in Africa, the floor is so low, we're like, well, we just need access to equipment and we need training, but what should come out of that is an interest and core facilities and opportunities.
So if I understand correctly, to summarize, it's to create a motivation for people to stay and to move forward. Is that correct?
Yeah.
You don't have here formal career. The people stood here and then go to other country to some opportunity that you don't have here. That's it.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Maybe if I could start with just a comment on Vlad's question, that maybe creating that atmosphere where the core facility manager or imaging scientist has the same reputation as a famous PI in the terms of the institution and the department heads and the funders, you know, and I think that would fix some of the things you're mentioning, right? So if we could show people that they're at that same world-class level of scientists, then maybe some of those other things would fall into place. I had a question. Yeah. Well, network together, I think, you know, yeah. There's no easy answers, I don't think, but that could be the goal, right? To just center everything you're doing around that. And I had a question for you, Caron. You had 700 applications. How did you guys go practically about sorting them? And then do you have plans of building capacity so you can meet that demand?
Painfully is the answer. So I was not involved in the passing of the applicants for that first workshop. I can say for the workshop, we're having the second iteration in October, and for the same workshop again, 24 participants, over 500 applications. The first filter has to be a rough pass. It's, are they eligible, and that we know that we want this to impact people who this can build their career and that they can share the knowledge. So that means we're probably not accepting undergraduates, sort of that sort of thing. As well as, have they just answered the basic questions that they're interested in participating, because this is microscopy. Not, for example, one applicant we had this year spoke a lot about CRISPR and didn't mention microscopes at all, kind of thing. The second pass is harder because values inherent to what we're trying to do with Imaging Africa means that we can't just accept the top 24 applicants. we have to make sure that we have good representation from as many different countries as possible. And if we have a excess of applicants from one country versus another, it means that someone's getting lucky and a lot of people are just being disregarded. And then there's a gender balance that we're trying to match as well. It's massive spreadsheets and a lot of debate. It often comes down to that. Yeah.
Do you have plans to build your capacity?
So Imaging Africa is going to start falling under the Africa Microscopy Initiative. And what we're planning to do there is alternate years, a big workshop, probably in Cape Town, with smaller satellite workshops in different regions that will be topic specific. Malaria research, TB research, plant science research, that sort of thing. And we're hoping that that will still meet the need for the basic exposure, as well as, oh, cool, this is how I can do this in my work in this region. And we're hoping that that's going to help. But we feasibly, we don't think we can run workshops bigger than 24 people at a time in our current setting. And we don't think we can do this more than once a year. So we're any suggestions on how to do that better would be welcome.
Well, I guess if some of your students end up being able to run their own workshops locally, but your strategy sounds really good.
Yeah.
I wanted to see if I have time for one more question, but
let's say yes.
Hi, thanks for your talks. Actually, I would like to start with a comment also, last questions, which I think connects to my questions as well, which is maybe one of the desired outcomes should be to connecting better what we do to the actual applications, because, you know, microscopy, it's an end for all of us. We want to do better microscopy, but it's also a tool, let's say a means to an end for a lot of people. And I think that getting scientists, local scientists to work in microscopy, it's also, you know, providing them with the tool to solve certain problems which are very locally, that require local scientists, right? Diseases, crops, soils. There's things that only people in Latin America or in Africa will invest times in doing that. So we can engage those scientists into those problems through microscopy as a way that they can find the answers to those problems. I think it would be a great way to engage younger scientists, and that would be a nice outcome. And this connects to actually my question. As I said, microscopy is an end, but it's also a means to that end, right? And a lot of us started microscopy, at least being trained in conferences or things by other societies, right? For example, I remember an EMBO conference that LIA organized in Buenos Aires. I think at the same time there was one in South Africa. And I was wondering, what is your comment regarding the interaction of these younger microscopy-related societies or organizations with, let's say, older, more, say, oriented to, I don't know, biochemistry or biology or say biology organizations, and how should we interact? Yeah.
We need to have one question, one answer, and one little question from Mariana, because we are over the time already.
One thing that we didn't talk is about how to deal with the politicians. Because, I mean, the money comes from the government, no? And I guess that this interaction that you are talking about related basically with the funding. It's very difficult interaction if you don't get the funding. And this is the problem that we have, at least from the Argentinian Society of Microscopy, no?
Yeah, but we also can, let's say, co-organize certain things with whatever, the biology society, right, or physics society.
Yeah, I know, but you can do it. The problem is how to make something that can you repeat, because it's like you do once and later another time, and it's more related with the person that is in charge of this congress or this activity that with the activity itself. You understand what I mean, no? I mean, how to see the future in this kind of activity? You need a strong support. And in general, in Latin America, the fundings are irregular. I mean, it's sometimes you have, later you don't have, and I guess that this is the problem.
Go ahead.
I'm Mariana. I had one question and then one more comment. So the question is, Here? Better? Okay. So the question is, how do you think we can reverse in some way this tendency to always collaborate with the global north? Do you think it's only a matter of visibility? And if not, then what else can we do to really promote collaborations within? And the comment or question, I don't know, is whether, I know that, for example, the Marie Curie fellowships for postdocs promote the collaboration with the postdocs' native country, and whether other funding agencies could be engaged to do the same, or whether they have been already.
Thank you. Anyone still want to take?
So, Mari, I think that we have to try to connect with those that are more experienced. So have to follow the knowledge. And I think that once you have the knowledge here, if you have knowledge in Latin America, and you have the correct infrastructure, then you will build a community surrounding this knowledge and this infrastructure. And this is how the places that are now established in the North were created. And I think that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, you know, we just have to follow the same path. Once we are able to establish the knowledge and the correct infrastructure and correct people, then we have a node of knowledge, and we retain the people around them. So
You're okay. Okay, thank you very much.